Hey, what's up, folks? Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers here, joined by fellow Lifetime Longhorn CJ Vogel. Thank you guys for joining us for the winning drive. Coach Shipley is out, but he'll be back for the next winning drive. He's handling some personal business, so we wish Coach well. But we'll be talking a lot about SEC Media Days, of course. My man CJ Vogel there for the last day of SEC Media Days. We'll dive into it. Still reflecting on the SEC Media Days from yesterday with Texas taking the podium, and we'll get into some of the thoughts that we have also from Texas's presentation at SEC Media Days. There are also a couple of other stories, some things that Saban has said that are actually very complimentary of Texas. We'll get into that coming up a little bit later on in the show. Of course, two of the Longhorns' rivals, they took the stage today, the Aggies and the Arkansas Razorbacks. So that's a big discussion, and we'll get into a lot of what was said there about two of Texas's rivals as well. But you can always interrupt the show at any time. Super Chats, they jump to the front of the line. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. So thank you for your participation. Thank you guys for joining us. Hook 'em. I hope everybody's having a great day. CJ Vogel, man, you guys are doing a great job down there at SEC Media Days. Just keeping up with all of the updates. Just want to let you know that first and foremost. But with day 4, give me one of your highlights from day 4. Two of Texas rivals taking the stage at SEC Media Days in the Aggies and the Razorbacks.
Yeah, thank you, Rod. It's been a fun week out here in Dallas. Of course, Texas's first SEC Media Days, just getting an idea of what's to come in the conference for the folks that have followed along on Twitter. And more importantly, on ontexasfootball.com, I think you have a great idea of how exciting it is, not only for Texas or OU, but for the rest of the league. I've counted plenty of questions to every coach that stood on stage so far here in Dallas in regards to what does it mean for the University of Texas and Oklahoma to be joining this conference. And they all say the competition level's going up, the excitement's going up, and in some cases, specifically today, the hatred is going to go up as well. And that's what we heard from Sam Pittman and Mike Elko today. Obviously, head coach at Arkansas, head coach at Texas A&M, two of Texas's big rivals who, Rod, we get to see them back on the schedule for the first time in quite some time this year. College football is getting two really good rivalries back when it comes to Arkansas and Texas A&M with the Texas Longhorns. They both mentioned it very briefly, and that's probably my big takeaway is obviously what Sam Pittman said today, kind of agreeing with Sarkisian said yesterday, that Arkansas fans hate Texas more than they like themselves. And, of course, with Elko is, yeah, I'm aware that this is a big rivalry. I didn't get a chance to be a part of it the last time I was in College Station. But now that I'm here, now that I'm the head coach at Texas A&M, I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm looking forward to it. And I've heard it from fans, donors alike, alumni. Don't lose to the University of Texas.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It's this year, man. The rivals, because you're getting two of them back. And remember, that was one of the themes for Sark. He talked about it yesterday multiple times. We're getting back to rivals. It does change everything. Texas doesn't play true rivalry games on the road. Their rival is Oklahoma, and in Texas, at least in the last few years, last decade and a half, they're used to playing that rivalry. Of course, that is at a neutral site, but they haven't played the Aggies in a long time. So they hadn't had to go to a hostile environment that is also a rivalry. The last time they did that was Arkansas. All right. And we see what happened there in 2021. I think Texas was a little shell-shocked by the amount of angst and the amount of vitriol and hatred that Arkansas had for them, and they ran into a buzzsaw. So I think that was a good experience to understand what you're going to see when you got to go to a rival. Texas OU is unique in its own way and special in its own way. There's no rivalry like it because it takes place at the Texas State Fair and it's split right down the middle. But also it's a difficult task, and its own, I think, its own trials and tribulations that you must overcome when you have to go on the road to a rival instead of just being on the road in a regular game. So I think they understand that. I'm glad they had that rivalry experience with Arkansas, because that's going to be big, especially when they got to go on the road and play the Aggies down there in Aggie land. Sam Pittman actually responded to one of his great moments that he had yesterday. He had a few of them. One was when he described the Texas-Arkansas rivalry as a rivalry where the Arkansas fans They hate Texas more than they like themselves. Nice line. A lot of old school Longhorn fans have thrown that line out there to describe the Texas-Arkansas rivalry, and now it's coming back. I'm glad Sark is bringing that back. But Sam Pittman had a response to it today, and the response was a bit surprising. Here's Sam Pittman responding to Sark's comment from yesterday about Arkansas.
We haven't played Texas for years, and when we played them a couple of years back, it was the most excited our fan base has been in a while. So I would say he's probably right. You know, the difference is Texas is certainly a different team than what we played. That was his first year there, and now, you know, obviously he's a great coach, great guy, and got a wonderful football team. But I'm glad that we're going to play them at home again. You know, I don't know if that's fair because they came there 2 years ago, but it's an early morning game. But he's probably correct. You'd have to ask the old hats of Arkansas, but he's probably right.
There you go. I think that's courtesy of Texas Student Television. Appreciate that. And you guys also asked the Texas A&M defensive lineman Shamar Turner pretty much the same question. Do Aggie fans hate the Longhorns more than they love themselves or love Texas A&M? And he said probably so. It's I think the rivalries, that's how strong the hatred is, man. It's strong. And I think for Longhorn fans, they got to get used to that, having multiple rivals again, because just having the Sooners as a rival, it's a great rivalry. But now adding two more, I think it's going to just ratchet up the competitive hatred and vitriol for you.
Yeah, I thought two things here off of Elko's statement earlier. And of course, Pittman is, first, I think nationally, folks know everywhere, Texas and OU, that's a rivalry. They don't like each other. You see it in the Cotton Bowl, 50-50 split down the middle. It's very unique. You don't see that replicated or even attempted to look as similar to what those two teams and programs and schools have been able to accomplish with that rivalry. They understand that's a game built on hatred. I don't know if folks in the SEC, in the region even, and certainly not across the country, understand how much hatred there is between Texas and Arkansas, plus Texas and Texas A&M. So to get that game back, as I mentioned earlier, it's tremendous for the game of college football. It's great for fans alike, Rod. I know that growing up, I had friends on the same neighborhood block that would have their team flags out, and you could drive down from corner to corner of the block, and you'd probably see 6 to 8 different flags just representing their school. And it would all be regional schools with the exception of a Michigan or an Alabama or whatever. But for the most part, it's your Alabamas, your Oklahomas, your Techs, your A&Ms, and your Texases. To get all three of those big rivals back for the Longhorns in a given season, I think Texas fans are in for one of the best seasons that they've experienced in their fandom, regardless of what happens on the field, because it's going to be as exciting as you've ever seen. Not only are you playing Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas A&M, but you get the defending champions, Michigan, on the road at the Big House. You get number 1 Georgia coming to your home at DKR. How exciting is that? That now 5 of your games this year, 5 of your 12, are as big and meaningful as you've ever seen in a single given season. So I think on top of everything, very, very exciting. I can't imagine, walking into the SEC and not playing these teams. So for them to be coming back, and of course, for Pittman to essentially agree, I mean, the emotions are going to be high, the passion is going to be high. And when Texas goes back to Fayetteville, I know that Arkansas is going to be ready to welcome them with open arms or not, depending on who you talk to in Fayetteville. But I know that Sarkisian and his team are going to be ready because of exactly what happened the last time that they were in Fayetteville and the way that game went down. And as Kirby Smart said, that humility is always 1 week away in the SEC. Well, Texas was certainly humbled the last time they were in Fayetteville. I know that's going to be a point of emphasis in the week leading up, and it's certainly going to be part of the game plan in which, Sarkisian coaches from an aggressive standpoint whenever they face off with the Piggies up in Fayetteville in November.
Yeah, and you got a chance actually to get to talk to some of these players and interview some of these players from Texas's rivals. Rivals coming, rekindling those rivals with Arkansas and A&M. One of the players who has a family connection to a Texas commit is Landon Jackson, the edge defender from Arkansas. Correct?
Yeah.
And
no, he was great to talk to. Absolutely, Rod.
And there were a couple of questions that I thought he brought up some interesting points on. One, he was asked about the asked about the best athletes in the SEC, and I believe he brought up Kelvin Banks when he was asked about the best athletes in the SEC. But also he brought up his family connection, obviously, to Lance Jackson.
And what do you think about adding the Texas Longhorns as a permanent rival again?
I think that's going to be big time for the conference. They're a dominant team, and I feel like them coming over will really, make our conference even more powerful. So I'm excited to play them, and I'm excited to be able to watch once I'm done here, being able to come back and watch Arkansas play them and just them in our conference overall.
And Arkansas doesn't really like Texas too much.
No, not a fan. Not a big fan. My younger brother's actually committed there right now and it's going there in January.
I was going to ask you, long term, 5-6 years from now, when both of y'all are out of school, who are the parents rooting for in that game?
Oh, my mom's rooting for the Hogs all day. I already met my mom a Hog. So,
have you talked with Lance about his commitment, his recruitment, giving him any advice there?
I tried real hard to bring him over before he committed, and I'm not going to lie, my sophomore year here, his junior year last year, his junior year of high school, going into that season, I almost got him to commit to Arkansas. And I thought I had him. And my parents talked him into waiting and filling out the process, this and that. And I guess he fell in love with Texas. So happy for him, and I'm ready to see what he does there.
One more question on him.
You or him?
I think he's more physically gifted. I feel like my work ethic was a lot more. I had a higher motor, and I feel like that goes a long way in high school. So I'd say statistically I was for sure, just by numbers, but I feel like he's way more gifted and will end up being much better.
Wow. I like that. I like that to admit that, even though siblings
back and forth, Rod.
Yeah, but he admitted, no, he's going to end up being a better player than me. You watched both of these guys. How do they compare? Obviously, his brother has a size advantage. His brother is huge.
Yeah. Lance absolutely gets that size advantage, right? Already standing 6'6", 270. What more do you want coming off the edge? Landon, I think, is a little quicker. Not as big, probably 6'5.5", probably 6'6", but more in that 255 range, I would say, right now. And that's, of course, after 4 years of college, in which, Rod, he started at LSU. I want to paint the picture here because Papa Jackson, both of their fathers, he ended up playing basketball at Texas A&M, right? Wow. That's a big deal. He's a big dude. I think he's 6'9", played college basketball at Texas A&M. Landon commits to LSU. Goes to LSU, spends a year there, says, I don't like it. Coach O gets fired. I'm going to transfer up to Arkansas. Okay. Starts at LSU, ends up at Arkansas. What's his younger brother do? Commits to Texas. So I love that family dynamic. You got Pops who played at A&M, and then their two sons ended up or will end up playing at probably the three largest rivals that Texas A&M will have had in their program, right? It's LSU, it's Texas A&M, and, of course, Texas. I think that family dynamic and what's going on inside that household is very humorous in a way, and that's kind of what posed the question of, who are the parents going to be rooting for whenever both of y'all are out of school and y'all can kind of sit back, relax, and kind of chirp one another when this game is played. And Landon heard it right there. Yeah, mom is going to be a pig forever. She's going to be calling the Hog. She's going to be all through and through Razorback. But I really enjoyed my time talking to Landon today. To his point about Lance kind of being the better athlete right now, again, I think it kind of gets forgotten a little bit. He throws 95 on the mound, Rod. That is a kid who probably could have gone Division I at tight end, edge, interior defensive line. You probably could have put 40 more pounds on him, and he would have been a heck of a right tackle or left tackle too. So, heck of a ball player. I actually tried to text him ahead of time to see if he had any questions or jokes or whatever to ask Landon, but I guess he was in a workout this morning up at Pleasant Grove. But Texas is getting a great player in him, and again, to kind of see what he could turn into with a couple years of development and strength and conditioning at the college level. Look at what Landon's done. He's going to be a first-team All-SEC edge rusher. This, I guess the ballot comes out tomorrow. So you'll see tomorrow. His name is going to be on the first-team All-SEC team for the preseason 2024 ballot. He's on mine. I expect him to be on plenty of others moving forward. But heck of a ball player. He'll have a lengthy NFL career. And again, if he's saying that the athleticism for his younger brother is higher than what he's working with right now, Texas is getting a good one. And that's why you saw him get bumped up to a 5-star on one service earlier this week.
Yeah, no, that's interesting that he would say that. Like I said, at the end, I'm glad he threw it in there that, no, he's going to be better than me. That would be the hope for Longhorn fans. All right, I want to get to a couple other topics. We'll also get to the questions. I know we got a few questions already out there, so we'll address them, I promise you. Super chats, they jump to the front of the line. You can interrupt the show at any time, but we will get to as many of the questions as we can. But first, I want to get to something that Nick Saban brought up. Well, a couple of Nick Saban basically some different things that he addressed at SEC Media Days in regards to Texas. The first thing that he brought up that was a bit surprising, he gave a really good compliment to the running back CJ Baxter. And I'll get the quote right here. I'll read it. He said, "I'm going to alleviate some concerns because I know you've got 7 wideouts that can play." So what he told Sark, "I know you've got 3 quarterbacks that all can play. Baxter was the best running back I saw of any team. All right.
Ooh.
You're going to be able to run the ball. If you can run it, you can always do better in the red zone. I'm just going to do a little coaching clinic here just in case." Then he goes on, but he said Baxter was the best running back I saw of any team. I haven't gone through the rosters of the teams they've played, but that's a hell of a compliment. And by the way, CJ Baxter didn't do much against Alabama last year.
No, that's why it was so surprising.
31 yards. I mean, he didn't do much at all. He had his breakout performances later on, K-State, Iowa State, some of those other games, as we know, and finished the season, over 600 yards. And we all saw the upside potentially of CJ Baxter. But what are your thoughts with Nick Saban? Nick Saban just throwing this out there? Is he being a bit hyperbolic out here, or is he actually, you believe that Nick Saban says that CJ Baxter best back that he saw all of last season?
That's incredible praise. If you're CJ Baxter, hearing that from Nick Saban, saying that you're the best back that he faced in a given season, that's for a freshman, Rod, and you mentioned it, he didn't really have much of an impact in that game, right? Only a few carries, about 30 yards or so?
That's it.
That's incredible praise. Yeah, I couldn't believe that he said that. I mean, credit to CJ Baxter. And again, Texas fans understand the talent that he is, right? 5-star guy out of Edgewater, Florida. Really, really talented guy. Staying healthy is going to be the key for him. And I've mentioned this on Twitter this week, sometimes on the message boards over at On Texas Football as well. It's a bad year for SEC running backs. There's not a guy that you can point to right now and say, he is far and away the number one guy, right? I think you have 4 right now that are kind of in contention for that first and second team All-SEC running back conversations. Jarquez Hunter out of Auburn, obviously Trevor Etienne now at Georgia, Montrell Johnson out of Florida. And what does Rocket Raheem Sanders do now that he's at South Carolina? This guy that rushed for 1,300 yards at Arkansas a few years ago. He played Texas in 2021, missed all of 2023, and is looking to bounce back with Beamer over in South Carolina. But I bring this up because the road or the path for CJ Baxter to potentially become and ascend into that elite SEC running back conversation by year's end is wide open. You could absolutely see a year in which he has 1,000 yards for Sarkisian and continues on that kind of streak that we hear Sarkisian talk about each offseason around this point. Yeah. You could absolutely be returning to this conversation, Rod, probably as we enter January or right as the season concludes, saying, yeah, CJ Baxter's in the conversation right now for being the best running back in the SEC, just because it's a down year at the position. You don't have a Derrick Henry. You don't have a Mark Ingram. You don't have a Leonard Fournette. There's not these guys that you can point to and say, I know for a fact right now he's going to go get 1,000 yards. What have we seen Sarkisian do with every running back that he's ever had since he's been a play caller at the Division I level? they've had 1,000 yards at some point, right? So that's why I'm very optimistic about CJ Baxter. I will post my SEC first team preseason ballot on Texas Football right after this, as I get back on the road and get back up to Allen. But I don't have CJ Baxter on it. I'll be honest, I don't. I do think by the end of the season, we'll be looking back saying he's one of the top 3 running backs in the conference. And by the vision of Nick Saban, I think that's pretty impactful stamp of approval right there. And SEC writers, media, coaches will all take notice of Nick Saban saying someone is the best at a position that he faced in a given season off of a freshman campaign in which he barely made much of an impact in that game.
It is interesting. When are the preseason SEC teams going to be released and the media poll? Usually
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. Okay, so they're doing it right after. Oh, they're trying to take up a whole week. SEC that's pretty smart. Yep. So they want to basically take up an entire week for SEC Media Days. Tomorrow, release the media poll and release the preseason team. That's smart. I'll tell you what wasn't too smart, I don't think, and forward thinking by the SEC. Why didn't they have one of their heavy hitters on the last day of SEC Media Days? Nothing against the Aggies, nothing against Auburn, nothing against Kentucky, nothing against Arkansas. But, there are heavy hitters right now in the SEC. And first of all, any of the newcomers, because that's considered really sexy. Georgia, Alabama, even LSU got some of that heavy hitter quality to it. Yeah. Don't you think I don't know. It seemed like they missed an opportunity to create buzz on the last day. Should have spread out the heavy hitters a little bit. Even if you put Texas last, people would have been upset because they would have been like, why'd you put Texas last? Oh, man, you gave them preferential treatment. So I understand that. Don't put Texas last. Put Georgia last. Put Alabama last. But, it seems like that was right. I don't know. Was that? Did you feel like there was less of a buzz today because of no heavy hitters?
Yeah, 100%. And again, to your point, Arkansas, maybe not as much buzz. Listen, A&M, new head coach. Walking in today, Radio Row was considerably less crowded than what we had seen day 1, 2, or 3. Yeah. And of course, Rod, to your point about kind of the scheduling, how easy would it have been to say, all right, Georgia day 1, Oklahoma day 2, you'll have Texas day 3, and here's Alabama to wrap everything up. It would have been buzzing just as much as you would have ever seen on day 1 through 4. You wouldn't have known the difference. I'm 100% with you. Today, no disrespect to Auburn or Kentucky or A&M or Arkansas, but the combination of the 4 together, who's the team that draws attraction? By the time Kentucky just got off stage inside, kind of doing their player breakouts, and obviously with Mark Stoops on stage, it was probably a quarter of the size in which we saw over the first 3 days. I think folks had just checked out. I'm telling you right now, I've almost checked out. If we didn't have the show today, I'd be on the road getting ice cream going home, Rod. It's been a long week, but to your point, they've done such a good job kind of dominating the airwaves this week, and of course we'll be talking about it again tomorrow. I'm surprised they didn't do it a big name today to kind of maintain that level of attraction, if you will. Yeah, I was wondering about that. I wonder, but hey, maybe they did it on purpose. Maybe they knew exactly what they were doing. I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, let's get to a couple of questions here. I got some other topics, but I want to address some of the questions first, and then we'll get back into some of the topics that I want to get your thoughts on, CJ. Here, Jedi Master Bevo. He's got one. Actually, he's got one for both of us. We'll start with the one for me. Hey, he says, Rod, Saban yesterday said the only question for Texas as a team is who is the other corner. Your thoughts? That is one of the major questions. Everything else, I guess, I don't know if it's a question as much as something that is unproven or, something that is maybe undecided. Like you said, wide receiver reps and stuff like that. Maybe even, I don't know if D tackle, maybe there is questions, but at least you have veterans and you brought in via the transfer portal 3 guys who had proven it already elsewhere. I don't know if you have, I guess Javion Cole has proven himself, but it's at a lower level. And, Gavin Holmes, has proven himself to a certain extent, even here at Texas. Nick Saban said it, I agree. For me, I've said if that solution
for the other corner. If it's something that you can't find with Gavin Holmes and Javion Cole, and I think they're going to be fine. So I'm not saying that they are not going to be the best option for you. But if for somehow it doesn't work out, you can always move Jadae Barron over there, move Jalen Gilbo, or even Makuba to nickel. And at safety, you're pretty deep. You trust Taft Daddy. You trust obviously Derek Williams and what he brings to the table. So those can be your main frontline safeties if you move Makuba down to nickel, or they really like Jalen Gilbo. I've heard Sark bring him up multiple times, unsolicited, like, oh man, Jalen Gilbo's doing really good. Okay. You trust Jalen Gilbo more than you trust Javion Cole or trust Gavin Holmes, then put Jalen Gilbo at the nickel, move Jadae Barron out to the corner. So I think that those are I think your contingency plans. If neither one of those guys work out, I think one of them will. I just can't tell you which one. I think ultimately the determining factor could be who can play a little bit more press, who can play more proficient press coverage, because I'm not sure which one of them can. I think Javion Cole actually may be better playing off coverage. But if Gavin Holmes is better playing press, then maybe it's a situational thing in terms of how you want to rotate those guys. So I think that's ultimately would be the determining factor for me on the outside looking in at that corner spot.
One of the takeaways I took from Saban saying that is, there's two things. First off, I think he's giving major praise and kind of a tip of the cap to Malik Muhammad, right? We know when he says there's one question mark on the Texas team and it's the other cornerback, well, we know who one of them is. He just got a first glimpse of him 2 games into his college career last year in Tuscaloosa, right? For him to not just say the cornerback position in general, I think that's a pretty good sign of respect right there for the former South Oak Cliff kid that Texas has very high hopes for. And 2, no mention of a defensive line issue. Again, I think for Nick Saban to mention that and say, hey, I'm looking at the DBs, who's going to be that one other cornerback opposite of Malik Muhammad? I think he's looking at the depth on the Texas interior defensive line thinking, okay, they've got guys. They've played snaps. They've been in weight rooms for 5 years now. They can piece together quality, kind of competent defensive line showings. That's not a weakness. I think that was telling. I was pretty encouraged by that. I wrote it down, and I was talking to a few guys in the media room earlier today saying, it makes sense, right? He understands that Manny Muhammad's a good player, and 2, Texas added a lot of pieces, so they have a lot of possible combinations for their interior defensive line. It's not as much of a glaring question mark as it might have been, right after the end of the 2023 season. Yeah.
That's a good point. Even Sark was worried about that interior D-line, added 3 players via the transfer portal, and now maybe he's less concerned about it. Good stuff there. Getting back to the other one here for you, Jedi Master Beaver, for you, CJ. He says, got one for you too. Texas baseball added those 2 portal arms this week. You called on Monday. Are they done in the portal now, CJ?
Yeah, they added Grayson Saunier out of Ole Miss. 10 starts, 11 appearances a year ago. I think he's a talented ball player. He'll kind of figure into that Tuesday, Sunday rotation conversation. I do think they're done right now. They've added, I believe, 8 arms out of the portal, 10 players in general. Sankey actually mentioned it today, Rod, that they're looking to cap scholarships on that scholarship limit in baseball around the mid-30s. So with that said, I'm not sure when that will go into effect, but I do think Texas is done at the moment. I think the portal, with this window as deep into the portal window as we've seen it, it's kind of, I don't want to say watered down, but your gyms are certainly captured up in other programs at the moment. So I think they're just about done probably.
All right. Thank you for that, Jedi Master Bevo. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll get back to some more of the questions here in a second. But first, I would like to thank one of our fantastic sponsors for sponsoring the winning drive. Really appreciate our good friends over at South Point Dodge for being part of the On Texas football family. So, folks, right now, Longhorn fans, a great chance for you to get to the point at South Point Dodge. You can score an easy point today at South Point Dodge this season. South Point Dodge has over 600 vehicles in stock, including a great selection of Ram 1500s, 2500s, and 3500s. Whatever your truck needs, South Point Dodge is the one-stop shop for you. And right now, they have a great deal going on 50 Ram 2500s, all marked down with huge savings. So you can head on over there and see them in person. They're right off I-35 in South Austin, or you can go to southpointdodge.com. Just go to southpointdodge.com. You can check out their fantastic inventory there at southpointdodge.com. So thank you very much to South Point Dodge. We appreciate their support. Your one-stop shop for all things automotive in Austin. All right, getting back to it, we'll get to some of the questions here. I got a quote from Nick Saban. So there were two things I wanted to bring up about Nick Saban, and they were very complimentary of the program. And he has been very complimentary of Texas. The one thing he said was that Texas wasn't going to run the conference. But other than that, most of the things that Nick Saban has said about Texas have been very complimentary. He did pick Texas to be in the SEC title game against Georgia. And he also, we just talked about it, very complimentary of Cedric Baxter. Here is why Nick Saban said he hates to coach against Sark. I love this quote. This is great. He said, I always hated playing against Texas. He said, I kind of always hated playing against Sark. He said, in practice for several years, as well as when we played them the last couple of years, because they do such a good job with what I call squeeze splits. We play in this day and age where people take these huge splits like Tennessee, which that's a problem too, but players are not used to, especially DBs, are not used to playing when you have squeeze splits because you put them in unfamiliar positions, whether it's run support or how they cover. When you're in squeeze splits, how can this guy get to that side of the field quickly, which messes up your pattern matches? And he went on to say that it can cause you a lot of problems. And he also pointed out that Georgia, it's going to cause Georgia a lot of problems because there's a lot of connective tissue, if you will, between Georgia's defense and Nick Saban's defense because he was the mentor for Kirby Smart. He said, I always hated playing against Texas, and Kirby Smart has got some of the same issues that we had. And so there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, squeeze splits. He's talking about.
Explain that to me like I'm 5, Rod.
It's reduced splits. Reduced splits are splits by the wide receivers that are tighter and closer to the line of scrimmage. These are the condensed and compressed sets that I talk about all the time. I talk about condensed formations, compressed formations. That's what he's talking about with Sark. You get a lot of those, and that's why he mentions how they will really mess up the rules of your pattern match coverages because he says, how can this guy get to that side of the field quickly? Meaning, how can the receiver on the far hash, all right, get to the other hash or the other numbers, the far numbers? How can he get there quicker? Sark does it with these reduced splits. So it's very tough on split field coverages. First of all, you're trying to have a coverage to the wide side, one coverage to the boundary, or a coverage to the strong side and to the weak side. It breaks all of those rules because those guys are so close in their set and where they are, they can easily reach the other side of the formation. And also, it's held on wheels because Sark uses a lot of pre-snap motions and shifts. So the guys can always go behind the line of scrimmage in some jet sweep motion, in some orbit motion. And then you got to think about working through traffic if you're as a defender. Because now I'm closer to the line of scrimmage. So now there's all this traffic I got to work through. My leverage is all screwed up. I got to have outside leverage. I can't have inside leverage because he's just created a ton of space on the outside. He's created like 20, 30 yards of space. I have to guard that space first and foremost, but that now makes me vulnerable to an inside release where he's working through traffic. I could get picked or rubbed pretty easily. So I can't play press, really. I can't go up and be physical with him. I got to give him a free release, and that free release could go underneath. It could be a switch release. He can go behind the line of scrimmage. which I've seen some guys do on their releases. Kind of go, it's not totally, you know what I mean? Jay Witt has done that a couple of times, and they come out on the other side of the formation. It puts so much stress on defenders, and Sark loves it because it brings DBs like me who don't like to tackle close to the line of scrimmage, as Saban mentioned, to be run defenders. So there's a lot of advantages to it, and Sark loves it. And it's something I've been pseudo tracking, but I'm gonna go back and track it and see what his percentage of his formation, and try to get you a formation with, because it's a philosophy that he took from the McShanahan tree. If you go look at, and I can get into this later in some football theory, but if you go look at you go look at the NFL and the offenses that have the lowest formation width, meaning their formations are the tightest, the most compressed, the most condensed formations. It's all Shanahan offenses. It's the bottom four, all Shanahan. San Francisco, Miami, Green Bay, Houston is thrown in there. It's all the McShanahan. I think the Rams are one of those teams as well thrown in there. It's the McShanahan clan for the most part, because that's one of the conceptual signatures of that offense. And Sark upped his usage of it when he followed him, like a lot of things, like pre-snap motion as well, when he followed the Shanahan clan there in Atlanta. And ever since he's been using it, and that's Nick Saban, the GOAT, telling you, it caused a lot of stress for his defense, and it's going to cause a lot of stress potentially for Kirby Smarts too.
Not only, Rod, to Saban's point about the tight splits, the different looks, and anytime I hear people talk about why it's so challenging to face a Steve Sarkisian offense, I'm always looking back to, I believe The Athletic had an article prior to the Oklahoma State Big 12 championship game. And they asked coaches, defensive coaches, coordinators, head coaches, whatever, what is it about Sarkisian that makes this so difficult? And they said, you never know what game plan you're going to get, because the unpredictability of his offense from a week-to-week basis, it completely changes. You just don't know. It's like blindfold, putting your hand in a marble jar and wondering what color you're going to get. You just don't have a clue. So I think about that all the time. And when there is a method to the madness, like tight or wide splits or extreme motion or shifts used against specific looks, it just adds to the intricacies of his offense and the way that he uses it and utilizes the playmakers that Texas currently has in its personnel department. It's really fascinating. And again, I've decided here, since I've had plenty of conversations here this weekend with some folks about Texas in the red zone. When I get back down to Austin this week, the first thing I'm going to do is we're going down every single game this past year, Rod, every snap in that red zone, and just kind of trying to dissect what the formation was, what the shifts were, what the concept was, and what the outcome was. So that's to come on Texas football. If you're trying to get deep into the weeds of why Texas was as bad as they were a year ago, it might take me a few days or maybe a week, but I'm excited for it, because that was a hot topic. We heard Sarkisian mention it. He's like, yeah, we don't have a Bijan, we don't have a Roshan, but you still have good players. And that should still account for some success to an extent, right? So it'll be interesting to go down the rabbit hole, but it really is fascinating hearing it from a guy like Nick Saban, who's seen everything over the last 20 years at Alabama in terms of offensive innovation, how to replicate success from coordinator to coordinator to coordinator that he's seen have essentially a revolving door in Tuscaloosa with. So it's really fascinating to hear him speak about Sarkisian. And again, that kind of message has been reciprocated all throughout college football in regards to the brilliance that is Steve Sarkisian when it comes to calling plays and getting an offensive game plan flowing week to week, I would say.
And that's interesting, because when he made the CJ Baxter comment, and one that, I might in football theory.
Which you hit right on the head, Rod. Tip the cap there. You nailed that.
Yeah, exactly. When he started talking about the Baxter comments, he was talking about red zone, actually. Because he ends it by saying, if you can run it, you can always do better in the red zone. And so I think if you get up to obviously the context of the conversation, he was talking about red zone. And like I said, Sark addressed red zone. He talked about it once, and we brought it up on one of the other live streams. So I won't read the quote for you, but what he brought up was the two main issues in the red zone difficulties last season were the post Bijan and Rojo hangover, which that was one of my theories it's just hard to get over, having the cheat codes of a Bijan and a Rojo on offense, especially in the red zone. And then he talked about and this is why you got to give Sark a lot of credit, man. He is a true man in the mirror kind of coach, where he's gonna look at himself and see really what he can do to help the situation and where he's at fault. And he said himself, he's the play caller. And which kind of aligns with what I thought the second issue was, and I hope when you do your dive, CJ, I can't wait to hear what you come up with. He talked about, he was always kind of moving, they're basically moving the baseline in the red zone, like changing what their identity was, always trying something new, experimenting with something different in the red zone constantly, which he doesn't think that allowed them to form an identity. And even he himself, I don't think he had any real idea about who he wanted to be or who they wanted to be offensively in the red zone. Did you want to be a jumbo bully ball team? Do you want to use more tricks and innovation in the red zone? Is it RPO? Do you want to pass more in the red zone? Do you want to run? Do you want to think players, not plays? And it's just, hey, it's AD Mitchell and the JT Sanders show in the red zone. I don't think he ever figured out. He kept, trying different things. And I think ultimately this year you're going to see more consistency in terms of the philosophy and the schemes and who they want to be in the red zone. I think you'll see more of that this year from Sark. And I honestly think one of the ways he's going to solve it, I think you'll see more pony package in the red zone. I know people are like, oh, Rod B, here he goes again with the pony package. All right, play the drinking game. Every time Rod B mentions pony package, take a drink. Yeah, and you'll be wasted, so don't play that game. But when I did my deep dive, CJ, and because I know you're going to come up with your own solutions, the potential solutions for the issue for Texas in the red zone, or issues, because it's multifactorial. One of the things that I discovered is that, first of all, there's a disproportionate amount of successful plays for Texas out of that pony package, where you're talking about red zone in between the 20s. And then if you go look at the teams in the NFL who have been the most successful in the red zone over the last 3-4 years consistently, it actually is teams who use a lot of two-back sets. And not a lot of teams do that in the NFL. We're talking about the 49ers, talking about the Miami Dolphins. Even the Green Bay Packers are in that conversation too. And I think it's, that Shanahan tree, I think that's part of it. So if I was him, I would go a lot of two-back sets in the red zone. Sounds a little crazy, but I think it could end up working out for you, which it does anyway, but it's specifically in that area. So one of the things that I found. And also something else you brought up, CJ, more misdirection. You'll see the trend. You'll see the pattern. They score a lot when they use a lot more misdirection in the red zone, whether it be wide receiver routes or whether that be bootleg waggle action with the quarterback, whether that be different backfield action, split flow, you name it. When I started tracking it, that's one of the themes of their most successful plays in the red zone.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. All right, good stuff. We'll come back to some of the questions here. Jordan, let's get to Jordan's question. This was a good one from earlier in the show. I keep hearing about how important the UT versus A&M rivalry is going to be, yet it's also mentioned that kids, now players at both schools, did not grow up watching it. Is this rivalry bigger for fans? I will say this. My generation is different, and this is probably to Jordan's point. I played in a Texas versus California All-Star game. Now, we had that much state pride, where it's the state of Texas versus the state of California. We lost to California on a Hail Mary. The Hail Mary was not on me. It was on the other side of the field. I watched it like everybody else. And we lost again. I think it was Kyle Bowler, actually. That dude, Baltimore, ended up in a first-round pick, I thought. Anyway.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, he wasn't bad, but still, we lost that game. But there was more state pride back then. I hear some of these guys – now they have a little bit more state pride than maybe some of the guys in, under the previous coaches, but it won't be like it was when I played. I think there was more state pride. I've heard a couple of guys talking about bringing, the University of Texas back, and they talked about University of Texas, but there was even pride for the state overall. Like I said, when I came out, that's why, and I think it helped the Aggies back then too. And I don't know if that is the case. I don't know if they still have that kind of pride. When R.C. Slocum recruited me, and my choices came down to Texas and Texas A&M. R.C. Slocum said, "Hey, if you want your parents to be able to go to all the games, you want to stay in the state of Texas." But that was an easy decision because the state of Texas, to me, I had a lot of pride in it, and I wanted to be a Texas football player that played East college ball in the state of Texas too. Like that mattered to me. I don't know if that matters to guys. I've heard more guys talking about the SEC, but now that Texas and Texas A&M are in the SEC, maybe that takes care of itself. But I've heard more of them, CJ, talk about playing in the SEC and how it matters, rather than playing, in the state of Texas or for the University of Texas.
It's interesting, right? Yeah, I think when Texas was in the Big 12, you might have seen some animosity from the kids Texas was playing, maybe at TCU or Texas Tech or Baylor or Oklahoma State, some of these regional schools, because Texas might not have offered them, right? Texas didn't pursue. Yeah. So there's a chip on their shoulder in regards to why they didn't like Texas in that fashion, right? Yeah, man, I'm only here because they didn't offer me. If they were to offer me, I would have gone. And so yeah, I don't see it as much with Texas A&M, but you still see some kids in that regard, right? I do think Texas and A&M, fan-wise, dislike each other more because they've lived it for the last 13 years, not having that game on the field. You do still see some players on both teams where maybe they were both recruited and pursued by both schools, or in this case today when I was talking to Torian York, the linebacker out of Temple, Texas, was a freshman All-American for Texas A&M. He said, yeah, I hate Texas because, one, they didn't recruit me. I don't talk to anybody at Texas because it's personal to me. And I think that's the first step in getting that, kind of rivalry and hatred started back between Texas and A&M. Here, give it a listen.
And recruit me. There's a lot of comparisons going on about me and Texas players in a sense. So let's kind of put those to rest in a sense.
Tori and Isaiah.
It's personal.
What kind of relationship do you have with some guys on the team at Texas?
I don't talk to anybody from Texas because it's that personal to me.
Man, I like that young man. I like it. I don't want to, but I like that young man. I like it.
Do you remember? I don't remember clearly, but back in the early or late 80s, early 90s, it was, the big sentiment around the NBA was, the superstars hated each other, right? You get the great rivalries, you get those great moments, and you don't see the hugs, the daps, the conversations afterward like you do now. Obviously, it's changed a little bit with social media, but when you're on those teams for as long as you are, you're supposed to hate the Celtics if you're the Lakers. You're supposed to hate the Red Sox if you're the Yankees. It goes on and on. You're supposed to hate Texas A&M if you're Texas and vice versa. You don't see that anymore because these kids train so often together when they're back home. They've played 7-on-7 and gone to school and whatever with each other growing up. They're all buddy-buddy. You don't see the true hatred as much as you used to pre-social media era. I love a good grudge. And I loved what Torian York had to say today. Yeah, screw Texas. They didn't recruit me. Why should I care about them? I don't talk to anybody over there. I don't have friends there. I love that. That's what a rivalry is about. It's about that passion. It's about that, kind of edge to get, that emotional advantage or on-field advantage, which we'll talk about later with Kyle Field. But I thought it was a great comment. Texas fans obviously were, someone's salty that they weren't offered by Texas. Yeah. And now he's playing for their biggest rival and hopes to beat them every year. I think it's tremendous. I love the comment.
I know, like I said, I don't want to like it because he's an Aggie, but I do appreciate the scones. I like it. And you know what? You're right. Even I had friends on the Aggie squad. I mean, I went to school with Teron Woolridge, who played linebacker at A&M. I went to school with Keith Joseph. He was a running back at A&M. So those guys were my friends. So even I had guys that I talked to. This young man's like, no, I don't talk to nobody over there. That's old school. That's real old school. That's before even my time. That's how much hatred he's trying to bring back in the rivalry. So yeah, I do. I appreciate that. So I don't know if it means as much to the players. Getting back to the original question, I don't know if it means as much to the players as it used to. I think it'll start to mean more when you get attitudes like the young man that we just played there, when you get more guys that have that attitude like he does. So maybe 5 years down the line, maybe 5 to 10 years down the line in this rivalry, you'll start to see the players care more about it than they do now. Because I agree with you. Right now, it is bigger for the fans because the fans, there were generations of fans who, like me, they experienced it. They remember living the Texas A&M rivalry. It's like Quinn Ewers was talking about. Hey, my dad told me it was bigger than the Texas OU game, which nobody can even fathom that because it's been at least 25 years since Texas A&M was a bigger game than the Texas OU game. And like I said before, then you get kind of before my time, before I started following it too. Jordan, good point there. I think for now it is, but for Sark, it better not be that way for those guys. For those players on the team, they got to know what it means. They got to know what it means. So you got to sit them down. You got to have a little mini history lesson with those guys. Let them know exactly what it means and how much.
All you got to do is play press on the fight song, Rod, and I think that should give you an understanding of, this game's going to mean something. Those folks in orange, they're going to be very unhappy if you come back without a win. I was actually listening to, I believe, was it Trey Zoom, the offensive lineman for Texas A&M today too. I didn't tweet it. I didn't have the quote, but he essentially was, what's the message to Texas fans expected to make the trip to Kyle Field for this game November 30th? And he said, bring your best because you're going to need it. We've got this place rocking. We're going to have it rolling. And if y'all can't make an impact, it's going to be all maroon. And listen, he's excited for the game. He grew up an Aggie fan. He said he used to walk into stores, Rod, as a kid and flip upside down any Longhorn sign he would have. Like that was a T-shirt, a hat, a mug, a cup, whatever, just because that's the way he was raised. And I think we've gotten away from that with this game gone, with it coming back, I think, in 5 or 6 years. The emotions with this game will reach as much of a high as we've ever seen it, especially if it continues to be played on that final week of the season with the college football playoff and kind of that full picture being decided on that week. It's going to be awesome.
And this is kind of the message for Aggies in this thing, because the reason that the Texas A&M rivalry became a regional rivalry, kind of lost its luster, is because Texas had more to lose than to gain in the rivalry at the time, and obviously A&M did not want to be the side piece, and they had become the side piece. Oklahoma was the main thing. This year, though, and I've been saying this over and over again, and Paul Feinbaum has now echoed the very same sentiment as well as others. The Texas A&M game is bigger and feels bigger than the Texas OU game. Just this 1 year, it feels that way. But if the Aggies are actually good, which a lot of Longhorn, that would shock some Longhorn fans because they don't expect the Aggies to be good. The Aggies are actually good, and then that game is a game that comes down to the wire, fourth quarter comeback, game-winning drive type win. Hell, it can't. If it's a loss, then oh man, even if the Longhorns could be 11-1, 10-2, if one of those losses are to the Aggies, they're gonna lose it. Someone said, Rod, did you let Sark know not to get a hotel in College Station the night before the game? Yeah, don't do that. We've experienced that too. Yeah, and that was food poisoning. I'm not saying it was connected to the Aggies, but we did have a mass kind of food poisoning on the team and took out our starting quarterback at the time. So yeah, it happens. It does happen. That was probably a rogue agent. I'm not sure that was not linked to the actual program. That some rogue agent got us, and I think that was a learning lesson for Coach Mac Brown. So Sark can call Mac about that. But yeah, this year, if that game is if it's a nail biter, if it's one of those, if it's a classic game, I think going forward, especially if the Aggies are good, you could get more hype or just as much hype for that game because you just talked about it at the end of the season too. Thanksgiving holiday and all of that the tradition surrounding it, you could end up getting some people who get just as hyped for that Texas A&M game as they do for the Texas OU game. It ain't bigger. It won't ever be bigger, except for this year. It feels that way just because they're rekindling it. Feels that way.
I tend to agree. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, but we'll see how the Longhorns. It may not be a nail biter, and the Aggies may not be good. May not even be something even to discuss. My man CB, appreciate you, CB, for joining us all the time. Chris Bennett, Rod, do you have cold sweats when someone brings up Arkansas, called the Cotton Bowl? Yeah, I think every generation's got a little taste of that rivalry, right? Remember, was it Charlie Strong got a little taste of Arkansas? Borderline erotic was that? That was Charlie's group, right? They got a little taste of it. Sark's group just got a little taste of it in 2021. I got a little taste of it. I believe that was 99 in the Cotton Bowl against Arkansas. We haven't had the consistent rivalry, but we get a little taste of it every now and then, and I don't like how it tastes. All right, I can tell you right now, and that's why you can't sleep on that. Every time we end up playing them, Texas is arguably a better team or just as good as Arkansas, and lately Arkansas has been getting the better of Texas in some of those matchups. That shouldn't be the case, but it just means more to them. That's for damn sure. It really does. CB also wants to know, CB, which tight end picks up where JT Sanders left off last year, yards and touchdowns. Yeah, this is a big topic of conversation in the chat right now. What are your thoughts, CJ, about the tight end position? I think Sark is going to take away some of the reps from 12, just regular 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends, and use some of his more exotic personnel groupings. The Big 11, Big 12 package. I think you're going to get more of the pony package, as I've talked about. And I think you're going to get some of the 10 personnel. I think you're going to get some of the red package. And we can call it something else. We can rename it. But I think you're going to get some of the 10 personnel package where he's going to use 4 wide receivers in on the field one time. I think you'll get that. He doesn't do it. He doesn't use it. This year, I think it's one of the new wrinkles he adds.
I tend to agree just because of the guys that Texas has in the stable of wide receivers, Rod. What's going to be interesting if he uses that almost a flex 11 personnel with a Amari Niblack out as maybe out wide kind of tight end look, right? That way you can go quickly. You don't need to substitute. You can, play that hurry up tempo and still have the option to run the football with the tight end as a lead blocker. That'll be interesting, right? Because you can throw Amari Niblack out wide and have him act as, well, relatively just a larger wide receiver. He's got that wiggle. He's got that straight line speed that you covet at the wide receiver position. I do think who's going to be the guy with the most targets for this season, I still lean Gunnar Helm. And I say that because I think you see him on the field for more snaps. I think you see him for longer situations on the field just because the versatility that he brings you in his, kind of presence at the line of scrimmage. What he can do in the running game, the passing game, that little check down that we've seen Quinn kind of dive to early in situations as well. That plays right into his conversation. If you throw Amari Niblack out into a pattern, well, now he's competing with an Isaiah Bond, a Ryan Wingo, and a Matthew Golden for receptions out there. The check down, there's only going to be one guy if that first option isn't there, right? So I look at it like Gunnar Helm is going to be your number 1 wide receiver to start. We'll see what happens as the season progresses and you get an idea of what Amari Niblack can bring to your offense. He's a heck of a football player, and he certainly provides more speed at the position than what we saw with Jatavian Sanders. The question is, will he be able to have those contested catches that JT was so good at a year ago, down the seam, in the end zone, regardless? Great player. I lean Gunnar Helm at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. My thought would be, CB, that some of those targets are just taken away by the other personnel groupings that I mentioned. I'm going to agree with CJ about Gunnar Helm, but Gunnar Helm, he's definitely easily your best blocker, so he's the one that makes your offense less predictable. You put Amari Niblack in there, they know you're not trying to run the football, and if you are trying to run the football, you're going to be at a disadvantage because pretty much he's going to lose that battle, or at least chances are he's going to end up losing that battle in the run game. And when you motion him out and with Amari Niblack, I do wonder, with a guy like that, he's going to be a problem for a safety or for a linebacker. I think that's when Sark's actually thinking about potentially, using those guys, like you said, in almost a boutique fashion, not Amari Niblack, I'm saying, in a boutique fashion, because we know Sark, he likes the tight end screen. Hell, you saw 4 tight end screens in the spring game alone. There are like 4 of those things. I don't know if he would like Gunnar Helm in that situation. That's not where Gunnar Helm's going to shine. That's where Amari Niblack would shine. Hell, maybe where Jordan Washington could shine. Just more guys who are more athletic and more dynamic. I don't necessarily know if Gunnar Helm is the guy that consistently can win one-on-ones if you engineer that matchup, which is what Sark usually did to get JT in that contested catch situation, and then, hey, give him a shot with a 50-50 ball. So I just think it's got to look different than it did with JT, because JT brought different traits and strengths to the table that I don't know if you get with just one tight end here. Of course you don't. And even with the other guys, you got to tailor the scheme toward their strengths a little bit. And I think Gunnar Helm needs to be schemed open more, and he'd be great. And that's why you have him in there on rundowns. So when you want to go play action pass and you want to have a delayed release and a leak, he can be your guy. You just talked about the dump off. I think he worked with the tight end screen just a little bit too, depending on how you scheme it open. But you don't want just Gunnar Helm in a one-on-one situation and he's got to go win. That's you're not doing him any favors. And with like I said, with Amari Niblack, I wonder if you're just way too predictable when Amari Niblack's in there. So it'll be interesting to see how Sark approaches it. But good stuff there, CB.
Rod, I think this is a really good point here. I mean, all spring we heard Juan Davis. Sark even mentioned him, this weekend here in Dallas as well. I don't know how expansive his role could get. Obviously, Helm, a Niblack already ahead of him. We're talking about who might be filling the shoes there. But, hey, he's been very praiseworthy of Juan Davis so far this offseason.
It's a good point. Yeah, that's another guy that may be able to fill a role there. So, like I said, I really can't visualize how that tight end position is going to work out. Like, I really don't, because I don't know if Amari Niblack's going to make a move. If he's going to make that kind of move where he can be a guy you can keep out there on early downs and on passing downs too. And that goes to Horn 7 question: how will Niblack change the tight end routes from JT's? I think I just kind of went through that. I think JT's a guy, you can scheme for a one-on-one situation. I think with Amari Niblack, you can do that as well. You can scheme him for a one-on-one situation. As I just pointed out, though, I think a team should be savvy enough not to put a linebacker on. They put a linebacker on Amari Niblack. That's going to be all she wrote. That guy's going to run. He's going to run right by him. JT Sanders ended up in a lot of contested catch situations because he couldn't run by guys. That wasn't necessarily his strength. Niblack actually can run by guys and create separation that JT Sanders really couldn't create. Not that JT's not a good tight end. He just has another unique set of elite traits that makes him a great tight end. For Amari Niblack, Amari Niblack's not a very well-rounded tight end, but he does have one elite trait, and that is his speed. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you'll see very similar route concepts, just maybe a little bit more often, right? Schemed open. Remember those two big plays in the second half for Sanders that got loose in the Alabama secondary? Those might be touchdowns if it's Amari Niblack strolling through the field. We actually saw Amari Niblack on a very similar route against Texas. Quinn Ewers mentioned it this week. He made some of our guys look silly. So I look at those deep crossers, those corners, some 15 to 20-yard routes that Quinn's so good at placing for Amari Niblack very often this year.
Yep. They're just going to try to find that matchup with Amari Niblack on a slow safety or a linebacker. And I wonder if Quinn this year will have more command over the offense to take advantage of those types of situations. He sees something. Can he check to it? He'll have the headset communication. That should make Sark feel safer about, you know what? I like what I see. I think the linebacker's matched up. Let's check to this call. Let's take advantage of it. All right. Getting back to the questions. When are we getting closer to end here? How about Jerry's Jack Links? He's got a two-parter. Could there be an argument made that Big 12 has a scheme advantage over the SEC? SEC has an obvious talent advantage over the Big 12. So in some respect, do those negate? Meaning we aren't in for as big of a surprise as people think.
That's a great
thanks
question.
for the question, Jerry. That is a good question. My theory is that you had the Big 12 ecosystem, two apex predators, that's Oklahoma and Texas, and the innovation essentially was sparked by teams with a huge talent deficit or talent disadvantage, trying to close that gap between the apex predators and their situation. How do you close that gap? Innovation, creativity, some tactical, strategic advantage of some kind. And that's when you're at the air raid influence and the three high safety defenses and your 3-3-5, stacks and flex defenses and your hybrid players that they bring in. And I think that's ultimately where the innovation in the Big 12, you could argue, and I would agree with Jerry Jack's links there, is that it, in my opinion, I think it is as good as any conference in the country over the last decade, hell, last 2 decades, probably. We talk about Gundy all the time. He's been one of the most innovative guys in college football. And you see a lot of coaches in the Big 12 do more with less because they have to. How else do you adapt in that ecosystem to be able to, compete with a Texas and with an Oklahoma? And I think that's how they close the gap in their own way. In the SEC, there is no closing the gap with that, right? There's just too much talent. You can only close the gap with talent and bring in scheming coaching. So I think Texas is in a really good place because Texas schematically, they're ahead of a lot of, and I'll go through this too. I plan on doing this in one of the live streams or actually on Football Theory. If you look at a lot of the trends and tendencies and signature philosophies of the SEC, the Texas is actually ahead of the game and ahead of the curve in a lot of those areas. And it's a very progressive offense from that respect. So that's why they matched up well with a lot of Big 12 defenses, because it's a really advanced modern offense.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting listening to Jeff Lebby earlier this week. He kind of mentioned that, Rod. We look at whether or not we'll continue to go quick, whether or not we'll continue to have our offensive philosophy. That was the question posed to him earlier, and he basically took a different angle. He said, yeah, I think in the Big 12 you had to take those approaches when guys didn't have the personnel in the scheme to run that 3 high. In the SEC, they don't run it as often, right? You don't really see teams in the SEC kind of use that 3 high safety look. That's been a kryptonite of sorts for Sarkisian, but for Jeff Lebby to have mentioned the same thing, that points to me that, hey, it affects him too. And so if he's looking at it in the sense that we're going into the SEC together with him at Mississippi State, Sarkisian at Texas right now, even Seth Luttrell at Oklahoma, all kind of the same, familiar tree, if you will, offensively.
Yep.
And they're looking at the defensive schemes right now saying, oh boy, hey, Rod, they don't run the 3 high here. I think all 3 are looking at it like, oh, this is great. Because what haunted all these teams? Oklahoma, very difficult games against Matt Campbell and Iowa State every year. They lost to Oklahoma State a year ago. Texas, the same thing. They couldn't get over Iowa State easily. They couldn't get over Oklahoma State easily. TCU, they did it as well. Kansas State, you see it all the time. These teams just adapt and they take what stands out in sense of ways to stop explosive offenses from a Levy or a Sarkisian, and it's a copycat league. You say it all the time. SEC doesn't have it yet. So I think that's one thing to keep an eye on as we move forward is who adopts it, who makes that a part of their game plan. If a Georgia or if an Alabama takes that page of a playbook, throws it in there, you might as well pack it up and move on to next week, because not only will they have the best athletes, best football players, but now you have the kryptonite to stop all the air raid offenses, and it's going to make things even more difficult.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But I think Texas actually is going to go into the SEC and they're going to set a lot of trends. I really do believe that offensively, because, and like I said, we'll break it down. There are a lot of things, a lot of cheat codes that the SEC doesn't use enough of. And maybe the 3 high is part of that. Hell, matter of fact, Saban just admitted it. Saban just talked about the squeeze splits, the condensed and compressed sets. They don't see as much of that as you would actually see in a league like the Big 12 because of the offensive innovation in the Big 12, because it's a really progressive league offensively. At one point, the NFL was looking at the Big 12 because of all the quarterbacks, because of the scheme, looking at a lot of those coaches to advance up to the NFL level. They always wanted help. Lincoln Riley should have went at the time. I don't know what the hell. He screwed that up. Hey, Lincoln, you should have cashed that lottery ticket when you had the time, brother. You should have went and coached the Dallas Cowboys when Jerry Jones was offering you that money. What was you waiting on? See? Him, Matt Campbell, too. The Big 12 coaches, they missed out. CJ. They should have cashed that lottery ticket at the time.
Yeah. That was an interesting conversation we had, too, is when Saban made the jumps from Utah to Florida to LSU, whenever, he always did it when rival schools were down, right? It was a pretty interesting conversation. When he went to Utah, the Pac-12 didn't have as many big dogs. When he was at made the jump over to Alabama. I mean, he was very strategic with LSU. Wasn't I mean, some of these schools that you consider Alabama or Florida had just left Urban Meyer go up to Ohio State. You know, he's very smart with that. So it's interesting the way that some guys don't jump at the best opportunity while others do, and they strategically wait until they can be at the top of their rival tree or whatever it might be.
Timing is everything. Timing is everything. That's partly why he's the GOAT. All right. One other item before we get out of here. Brandon Harris, the GM of the Longhorns, actually did an interview with 247 Sports. One of the things they asked him at the end of the interview there, CJ, was they have a true or false segment. They did true or false. Will Texas finish with a top 5 class? And he said true. They will finish with the top 5 class. When they asked him about where Texas is ranked right now, his response, I'm paraphrasing, it was that they don't pay attention to ratings and stars. He said, "All respect to you guys and what y'all do. Ratings and stars are not our main objective. We're just trying to bring in the best talent that fits our culture and develop that talent." And when he was asked about NIL and how NIL has affected, recruiting and what he does as the evaluator and GM of the program, he said our goal always is just to educate people on NIL and talk about the different opportunities that are afforded to you at the University of Texas. He basically went on to say that they like to shine a light on the other opportunities that are afforded to you by coming to Texas, not just beat the highest offer. Essentially implying that they're not going to be trying to beat the highest offer every time. It's not, hey, you name the price, we'll beat it. That's not really the game that Texas is playing. At least that's what I got from it. So what are your thoughts, Brandon Harris? He says they will be top 5 class. He just says, the season will play a role in how they finish in recruiting. And I think they're banking on having a really good season and then having a really good finish in recruiting.
Yeah, I think they're ready to walk into the SEC and compete for a national or for a conference championship. Sarkisian mentioned that. I think that's the message inside the building of Moncrief as well. It's going to be big, right? We've seen Sarkisian come away with big flips, big late commitments over the last couple of cycles, whether it be Ryan Wingo, Brandon Baker, Anthony Hill, Aaron Butler. A lot of these guys, Texas waited late to get involved or to ramp up the heat and saw them flip into the class. That's going to be the case again this year. And I think Texas right now, some of the guys that are still in great standing with, whether it be a Jamie French or guys along the lines of that, I think that's going to see some movement in this Texas class later on. Of course, 15 commits in the class at the moment. You're sitting right around outside the top 10. You're going to need a good year to get into the top 5. Obviously, there's some really good classes out there, but I think Texas is going to be in that conversation to get from 8, 7, 6 down into that 4 or 5 category by the time this signing day comes around in December.
Yeah, good stuff there. All right, before we get out of here, thank you guys for your participation. Really appreciate it. Let's thank our friends over at Flat Creek Estate Winery, and we want to thank them for being a part of the On Texas football family. And folks, did you know the most awarded wine in Texas actually is the vineyard closest to Austin, Texas? That's right, Flat Creek Estate Winery is just minutes from downtown Austin, and they've won award after award this year for their vintage wine, Super Texan. Super Texan is now available at your local spec, so give it a try. Of course, Flat Creek is also a gorgeous venue with barbecues and wine tastings every single weekend. It's perfect for a day date with your significant other or for that weekend getaway. Go check it out for yourself. That's Flat Creek Estate Winery, flatcreekestate.com. Also, let you know that it is also at Central Market. I saw that as well because my wife was doing some shopping there and saw that Super Texan that she loves so much there. So you can go check it out. They have it there available. But go to flatcreekestate.com to find out more about their great selection and Flat Creek Estate wine. So thank you very much to Flat Creek for sponsoring the Winning Drive. And thank you for being part of the On Texas football family. Thank you guys for watching and listening to another edition of the Winning Drive. Coach will be back with us next week. We'll be back on Monday on the Winning Drive 4:15 to around 5:30-ish, like it is right now. CJ, any last words for the people? Don't forget, tomorrow you got coffee and football at 8 a.m. from 8 to 10 with Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton. And also don't forget, we got a 1 p.m. live stream on Friday. Any last words for the people, CJ?
No, thanks for following along with us over at On Texas Football for SEC Media Days. It was a first for Texas. It was a first for us. I hope y'all enjoyed the coverage because this was a blast. I'm excited for the season. July 31st, Rod, right around the corner.
CJ is just trying to go get to that game because I know. Did you pay for the pre-release? Or are you waiting tomorrow for the official release?
I've got to get the PlayStation first, Rod. I don't even have that. So.
So they tell you CJ is gonna stop on his way home on the road, get the console, and then get to ordering the game. But either way, we'll look forward to it. CJ, please be safe on the road, brother, and great job down there at SEC Media Days. Like I said, be safe out there. Thank you guys for joining us. Thanks to Matthew behind the scenes. Matthew doing a great job as always. He is the real MVP. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to South Point Dodge. Also, thank you to Flat Creek Estate Winery. We appreciate them being part of the On Texas football family, and we appreciate you. You're the most important part of this On Texas football community. Thank you for helping us build it. Until next time, same channel. Hook 'em horns.